curious, like, what's been your experience in the beginning, in the early days, meeting the crypto Twitter people, and, you know, how does it compare to the Anons and Degens that we know and love today?
Anons is a very interesting trend and phenomenon that we've talked about it, and I actually kind of reflect on, because when I started, I started shitcoining back in like ICO days, like 2017. Everyone was Anon. Anon was the norm, right? But it was a little bit different than crypto Twitter Anons that you see nowadays, where, you kind of think of like shit posters and like milady type of folks, and it's really trendy, and you kind of like don't know who's behind it, but they have very all similar characteristics and personalities. You think of like the personalities of Anons nowadays, and you associate it with like the number of followers, etc. Back in the day, Anons were kind of people who got into crypto because of its ideology of privacy and decentralization and being permissionless, right? People don't want to dox themselves for safety reasons, for, obviously like tax reasons, but Anons back in the days used to be like the usernames, like their Telegram handles, or, their like exchange login usernames. The leaderboards, I mean, I know it's still around today, but even more so back in the day, like on these big exchanges, like Poloniex definitely used to be a bigger exchange than now, but like the leaderboards, all they had their names, and those were like the Anons. And these people often did it because they didn't want to be doxxed, not for popularity. They didn't want to get popularity. They didn't want people to know who they were, what type of person they were, how much they had, or, like link themselves.
Right.
Back in the day, like being associated with crypto, being associated with Bitcoin often still like had really bad connotations. Like Silk Road was still a thing. It was a big thing, actually. A lot of the times, if you talk to people in our age group, right, people who's heard of Bitcoin back then were people who were like selling fake IDs. And it was like that one kid who was like really good at computer, who had a plug to get fake IDs, but, he was really just getting from Silk Road, and he was using Bitcoin to pay for it.
Right.
Or drug dealers, right? But more than that, if you were kind of in and you were like doing these ICOs and, you were on these like exchanges, it was because like you knew a little bit more than the average Joes about the internet. You were probably mining Bitcoin in like your company's basement.
And
like,
you were so far ahead of the curve that you like didn't want people to know like what you're doing, because it would ruin all the fun or all the yield or all the benefits you could get from being that early customer on Silk Road and mining the Bitcoin and escaping the taxes and all that stuff. Like, so the Anon thing started, I guess, if I'm hearing you correctly, as just a way to protect yourself, and now it's kind of evolved into like a whole cultural phenomenon where like you'll see these Anon Twitter accounts with like 20,000 followers. They got a NFT profile picture, and all that. And this is before NFTs were even a concept at all, right?
Right. And nowadays, obviously we have those trader Anons that, people definitely want to protect themselves, a little bit of that, but there's a lot of scams with Anons too. People just don't want to be discovered. They're like, they're getting paid by some, company to like promote certain trades, and those are done by Anons. And then there's like the whole like, NFT type of crowd where they're really forming a community. Like, I see posts like, oh, if you're going to Milady rave and you don't want to dox yourself, then you can just say you're me. It's really interesting. And when I look at these Anon accounts nowadays, I have no idea who are behind these accounts, but more or less, like I think, oh, these are probably like younger, like Gen Z folks who are really into this like culture of like crypto Twitter, right? Whereas back then, when I think of these Anons, I'm really thinking like smart people who were ahead of their time, and they don't want those followings on Twitter. They were really just doing it to protect themselves.